China and the United States, two great powers locked in a global struggle. But how much do their rivalries actually shape domestic politics in Southeast Asia? Meet Professor Duncan McCargo, a leading scholar in Southeast Asian politics, whose work challenges conventional narratives on geopolitics and domestic governance.
In 1985, shockingly enough, when I was a mere undergraduate student, and at that time I really wanted to go to Japan, but it was very expensive, and I went to Thailand instead, so my decision to go to Thailand was a little bit random. I didn't have any preconceptions about what I was doing. I was just wandering around for a few weeks, but somehow I got really drawn into talking to people, trying to understand the society and what was going on. And as a result of that, went back to Thailand, spent a year studying Thai, living with a Thai family, and then returned to the UK and did my graduate studies working on the politics of Thailand. So one thing led to another.
With years of expertise in comparative politics, Professor Duncan has worked extensively to uncover the deeper forces shaping political attitudes in Thailand.
Whenever I would give a talk about the politics of Thailand, particularly, but not only in the US, people would say, yes, but isn't this all about China? Isn't the contestation between the different parties in Thailand really just code for, Western versus Chinese influence and great power dynamics? So the article really starts from that question, which I was always struggling to answer. And I thought, if we can do this survey and I can get the data and work with the colleagues who have been interviewing people about attitudes to China, and we put in some questions about Thai's attitudes to domestic politics, then we can try to find out if these two things are in fact connected in the way that we think they're connected. So that's really where the whole thing started off. My Czech colleagues were asking a huge number of questions about attitudes to China, about trade, about culture, about politics, which was a standard set of questions they asked right across the Asia-Pacific region. So those were the same in the Thailand survey, which means we've got an enormous amount of information about what people think about China. And let me tell you that overwhelmingly, Thais have very positive views about China. They are happy with lots of things about Chinese economic influence. They agreed with many things about Chinese foreign policy. They even, and this was surprising because we were doing the survey in 2022 during the COVID period, and we had one question: has your general view of China become better or worse during the last 3 years? And 74% said it actually improved. So overall, this seems to suggest that Thais really like China. But there is one question that really asks people to choose. It says, if you had to decide between the United States and China, which would you choose to align with? Wow. And that's the only question where we got this kind of answer: 66.3 USA and 23.6 China. So suddenly, if you put these very people who said, oh, we love America, we love China, we love the European Union, we love Singapore, we love Japan, we even don't mind North Korea, we like everybody. If you ask them, if you've got to choose, they came up with a slightly different answer. What we're then trying to work out is, what has that got to do with the domestic politics? So we were able to insert a set of questions into the survey about domestic politics, and those are questions that not many people have really asked. We asked people to what extent they agree or disagree with the following statements, and they include: the student protesters are causing a lot of problems for the country. That was about the 2020-21 student protests, which were relatively recent at the time of the survey. Another question: there is no need to reform the monarchy. Well, monarchical reform was one of the big demands of those protests. The present constitution should be completely rewritten. The southern border provinces must never be allowed to rule themselves. Provincial governors should be elected by local people. The military should not be allowed to stage any more coups. People should have the right to free healthcare. So these are much more provocative questions, and in fact I'm not aware of any other survey where people have been asked so directly their views on this particular set of sensitive issues, particularly the one about the student protests, the monarchy and self-rule for the South. Based on that and a couple of other questions, we asked people how they voted in the last election, what they would vote if there were to be an election this coming weekend, and also what they thought about the performance of the then Prime Minister, General Prayut Chan-o-cha, who was the military general who had taken power in the 2014 coup and was still serving as Prime Minister at this time after 8 years. So with those questions and these questions, we were able to plot people along a spectrum in terms of where their political party support was and their support for certain kinds of views, and then try to find out if these very same people were in fact the ones who were more sympathetic to the US versus the ones who were more sympathetic to China. It wasn't a clear-cut case that the people who supported the conservative political parties supported China versus the US. It's true that those who voted more liberally, as it were, in the 2019 election were more likely to align with the US. But still around half of the conservative voters chose to align with the US over China. And for the 2022 hypothetical election, the figures were almost exactly the same. So those who were coded as being more liberal were more likely to choose a closer alignment than the US than those who identified as yellow. But then, even amongst those who define themselves as yellow, which is the sort of conservative, pro-military, pro-monarchy position, those who'd opposed Thaksin, they didn't display a strong preference for aligning with China. So the basic idea that there are all these closet authoritarian China supporters who are manifesting themselves in backing certain conservative parties, it's not really borne out by the data. So everything has become more complicated. If you're now on the Democratic side, are you with the Pertai party, the pro-Thaksin party, which forms the core of the current government, or not? And people are divided even about that. So, just when you think you've figured out what's going on in Thailand, there's another twist, there's another turn, another complication, which again makes it really difficult to say, well, there are the good guys and the bad guys. There are the Democrats and there are the authoritarians. Well, hang on a minute. It's not really that simple because the designations and affiliations and orientations are changing. If you're thinking about geopolitics, don't jump to the conclusion that you can use a binary geopolitical lens to understand what's going on in countries. We can think about geopolitical contestation and we can think about China or Russia or the US as major players, but don't leap to the assumption that that will give us a sort of a master text that's going to help us to understand what's really going on inside these countries, all of which have a lot of complexity and a lot of specificity that needs to be studied. So it's an argument for expertise, and it's an argument for deep research, it's an argument for academics to go to places and study them alongside policymakers and journalists and other people, and it's an argument for a place like NTU to teach courses about Southeast Asian politics and Thai politics and many other subjects which will help young Singaporeans and other people who come to study here to understand the region that's surrounding them.
As we close this episode on the complexities of Thai politics and great power narratives, one thing is clear. Not everything is all about China. It's time to rethink Thailand, not as a pawn in a global struggle, but as a nation with its own agency.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and follow us for more groundbreaking research from the world of academia. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we shift our focus from geopolitics to spiritual landscapes, exploring the cultural and historical significance of Chinese vernacular shrines in Singapore.